Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollands High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Alright, welcome back. So at this point we have our soundstage, our curtains, should have all of our pieces to kind of get going. We have our egg, our stool, our little microphone, the curtain rod, the door, the two back walls. So we're pretty much ready to start animating the scene. All we have to do now is set up some controllers that will help us as we animate, because we don't want to animate our pieces directly. That can cause other problems. You might want to move something, and you might find it hard to click on because you have so much stuff in your scene. So we're going to make some controls to simplify our life just a bit. Before I make any controls, though, I just noticed my microphone is not aiming at my little egg guy. Looks kind of weird to be pointing straight, and because he's supposed to be talking. So I'm just going to select my microphone, and I will just rotate it a little to make it look like it's in preparation for him to come up and start chatting. All right. What I want to do now is I'm going to set everything, because everything should have its own layer. I'm going to set all these things onto reference so I don't accidentally click on them. I'll even set Mr. Eggy Whites to reference so I don't have to worry about clicking on him. And I'll come down to my curtain layer, and I want my curtain and my curtain rod. First thing I want to do with my curtain is I want to set up a large curtain. If you look at like a set of curtains, you'll notice you have this like a little skirt curtain that kind of covers the top of this piece, and then you have the open curtain that opens up. And the little skirt just kind of hides the curtain rod. So that's what I'm going to make real quick. I'm just going to take my curtain layer. I'm going to unreference it. We can do it a couple different ways. We can duplicate off of this, or we can just create another object. I think what I'm going to do is create a duplication and then just copy it over. So let's do a duplicate. I'm going to pull this out, and from there, I'll duplicate both. Control D, duplicate both of these. But I want to join these as a solid object. So with them both selected, go up to polygons, and you can hit the combine tool, and that will combine these two curtains together. Front view, I'm going to shrink them, so that's the R key, and I will just scale these down. W, and I will move this up. I'll just center it on the curtain rod. About there is probably fine. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but we do see these two pieces are overlapping. These vertices, if I grab them and pull them, you can see that they are separate. So I'm just going to sew those together. Target weld tool. Whoops. Select one vertex, sew it. Another one, sew it. Q on the keyboard. Q gets rid of the tool. Vertex mode, so we can select these vertices. I'm just going to snap them back in the center by holding X and pulling it. So now we should have one continuous curtain piece. And I will pull that down. Let's go into object mode. And I will pull this about there. I'll pull it back just a tad. Okay. This one I will just add a new layer layers, create from selection. This is going to be my curtain top. I'll also make that blue. And so that it's lined up with my other curtain, there's these little steppers here. This one says move selection up, move selection down. I'm going to move this down the list. So I have my curtain top layer and just my curtain. And I should be able to toggle my curtain top layer off and my curtains separately. All right. That's just there for the aesthetics. Now we can go ahead and make our controls. The way I'm going to do the controls is I'm going to take the curtain rod and I'm just going to duplicate it. So down on my curtain rod, I'm going to unreference it so I can toggle it. Select my curtain rod and I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. I'm going to bring this up some and I'll go in my front view just so I can see where it's at. And I'm going to have it just above my curtain rod. Now this thing I'm going to take the texture off of it. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go all the way down to assign existing material. I'm just going to choose Lambert 1 because that's the default and it'll turn it back to gray. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can visually see this is going to be a control, and this actually won't render when we go to render it, and I'll show you how to make it so it will not render. Up here on the curtain rod that we have selected, this new one, I'm going to rename this control underscore curtain right. This is going to control the right curtain, and then remember that is stage right. And then we'll make another one to control the left curtain. So what I want to do is I want to shrink this down because right now it's too big. I'm going to go in the front view and I will go into vertex mode. That's F9 on the keyboard. Select these on the end and I'm going to hold X and snap these to the middle of the grid. That's this big grid line right here. So there we are, snap to the grid. And now what I'm going to do is go back into object mode. That's F8. And what I want to do is I want to change this pivot point. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this object control the open and close of our curtain. And the way I'm going to do that is by operating the scaling option on this thing. So when I hit R and I go to scale this, it's going to change the length of the curtain. Okay. So the way to do that is if I hit Insert on the keyboard, Insert's right above Delete, that'll let me move this pivot point. So let me go into my front view, and I will hold X on the keyboard, and I'm just going to drag the pivot point to the end. And I'm going to snap this right there actually is going to be just fine. If you want, you can push it right to the end, but right here is the grid space, so that's fine. I'm going to right click, actually I'm going to hit Insert to bring it back to normal. And now if I hit the R key and I grab my scaler in the X, it shrinks my curtain rod. See that? And it shrinks from this part of the rod, not the middle or not the end. It shrinks from this side. And that's going to help us when we set up the animation. So what I'm going to do now, I'll put this back at 1, is I need to duplicate this for the other side. So what I can do is I can press Control D to duplicate and drag the new one out over this way. And I'm just going to move over and center this up. And I'll have to do the same thing that I did with the other rod. I'm going to press Insert on the keyboard, hold X, and I'm going to snap this all the way down at the other end. And that looks spot on. So we now have the same ability with this one. If we hit R on the keyboard, we can scale. And that's pretty good. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to parent this object. We're going to parent the curtain to the curtain controller. So what that means is this curtain is going to be controlled by the controller. If we select the controller, it'll also select the curtain. The way we do that is we select the object we want to parent, and then we hold Shift and click on the object we want to become the actual parent. So what we're parenting and what we're parenting to. The green object is going to be the one that becomes the parent. The white one will become the child. And we'll see how that works in just a second. If we hit the P key, and down here we see result, and this becomes the parent. If I select the parent and I move it, the child will follow. Okay? If I select the child and move the child can go do whatever it wants until the parent says, hey, get back here, and then the child will always follow the parent. Okay? This is going to help us as we animate. Now if I go ahead and hit the R key, I select my controller, hit the R key, and I go ahead and scale this, we can now open and close our curtain, which is really handy. I'm going to go to the other curtain, select the controller, make sure that we name the new controller the control curtain left, because that is stage left. We need to select the curtain, and then we want to select what we're going to parent it to. We're parenting the curtain to the rod, so we will now Shift, select the rod. If the rod is green, we know that the rod will become the parent, and then the white will become the child. There we go. And we can test that. We can hit R on the keyboard, scale it down, and you can see it. Awesome. So now that we have our controllers set up, we need to have a main control for the stage. And the reason we need that is it's going to be hard to select this controller while we're trying to animate because it's hiding behind the curtain. We could move these up above or wherever, but we're going to have a master controller that controls both of these pieces. So what we can do is go up to Create, come down to Locator, and this will create a little location device, a little widget at the center of our board right here. If we hit W, we can move this widget up. And right now it's kind of tiny, so what I'm going to do is come over to this scale over here where it says Locator 1. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this to, I'll say Stage Controller. And here I'm going to come down to its scale. I'm going to highlight all of these and just say 50. And now we can easily see our controller. Anytime we need it, it's right there. I can grab it. I'm going to move it back just a bit, just so it's out of my way. But if I ever need it, I can reach up and grab it, and it's there. What we have to do for the controller is we need to set up the control mechanism so it can have access to these curtain rods. Over here on the control panel, our channel box, we go to Edit and come down to Add Attribute. What this will do, if you look at the channel box right now, we have translation, rotation, scale, and visibility. These are attributes, and we can mess with all these if we want to. What we're doing now is we're going to add a new attribute to this list that will allow us to control these pieces. So inside the new attribute editor window, we have the option for a long name and a short name. Long name is just going to be what do we have? That's going to be control curtain right. And you have an object to use a short, or an option to use a short name. I'm just going to have it use the long name. I'm going to come down here. It says what kind of data type. You can have a vector, an integer. Integers are whole values. Strings are, letters, words. Enumerations are usually a list. Booleans are yes and no, true or false. And then a floating point is a number that has a decimal. So I'm going to choose a floating point. Its attribute type will be a scalar because it can go from a range from 0 to whatever number. So as it adds together, it becomes a scalar. We have a numeric attribute property. We have a minimum. So its minimum value will be 0. Its maximum value, you can do this any number that you like, but I'm just going to do a maximum value of 10. So 10 will be all the way on, and 0 will be all the way off, or all the way open, all the way closed. I'm going to set that up, and then I will hit OK. And you will see that we have a control curtain right has been added. So now what we're going to do is go up to our little tab here and change it to animation. And we'll come to the key setting. So make sure that our stage controller is selected. We're going to set a key. So key, and we're going to come down to set driven key. And this is the type of animation that allows us to use one object to drive the animation of another. Just like we use our timeline, we use time to kind of drive the basic animation of objects in our scene. We can use an object to drive the animation of another object, which is handy. So if you have like a car and you want to move the car and the wheels rotate as you move it, you can have the car set up as your driver, and as it moves in a certain direction, the wheels will rotate automatically. So you don't have to do any weird animation for those. That happens by itself. So when you animate the car, the wheels just kind of do its thing. So we're going to do that with this. So key, set driven key, we'll hit set, and we'll get this little dialog. And it wants to know who the driver is, so who is controlling the animation, and then the driven is who is being controlled. Right now it says the stage controller is being driven, but that's not true. We want our stage controller to be our driver. So make sure your stage controller is selected. Come down here and say load driver, and it'll put it in the driver's seat. The piece I want to control is going to be my stage right controller. So I'm going to come down here and say load driven. So now my driver is the stage controller, and my driven is my control curtain right. And I actually spelled my curtain wrong. Oh well. That's fine. I can fix that later. So what I do now is I have to tell it what attributes control what other attributes. So over here are all my attributes for this object that we can manipulate. And down here is all the attributes for this object that we can manipulate. So if I select my curtain control right, I'm going to come down here and I want to make sure which one of these I have to control. If I hit E, whoops, if I select my curtain rod and I hit the E key, I can see that the direction I can scale in, the blue direction is Z, the green direction is Y, and the red direction, which is this little red guy, that is going to be X. So I'm going to come down to here, select my curtain control right, and come down to my curtain control right driven, and select its scale in the X. So at 0, my curtain is going to be closed. Okay? So I'm going to hit key. And that's going to set a keyframe. See how it turned red over here? So our curtain control right has a key set on the scale X. If I select my controller, now I can come down to my control curtain right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 10. I'm going to hit enter. And now I will come down to my scale for my curtain control right, and I'm going to grab this guy, make sure I grab the controller, and I will scale this to where I want it to be. I say right there. Come over to the scale, make sure I'm under the right object, so curtain control right. I'm going to have it scaled to 0.25. That's good. And I will come over here to the key and hit key. And what that'll do is now when I grab this control node, if I come in here to my curtain controller and I'll just come out and middle mouse click and drag, you can see that that will automatically update. And it won't go too low and it won't go too far, so it won't overscale, which is nice. So that's how we set a driven key for this controller. Now we're going to set up the left key. So I'm going to hit the close button. Select my stage controller object. Over in edit, I'm going to come down and I want to go to add attribute. And this one's going to be control curtain left. Again, we want this to be a float. It's going to be a scalar. Our minimum value will be 0. Our maximum value will be 10. We can just hit OK. You can see it pops in down here. With my object selected, I am going to go up to key, come down to set driven key, hit set. And again, we get our dialog, but we want our stage controller to be the driver. So load driver. And now we want our left curtain controller to be the driven. So load driven. I'm going to come back up to my driver. I'm going to select my driver, select curtain left on its attributes. At 0, this is going to be all the way closed. And I'm going to come down to its scale value, because we're scaling the X, and we'll hit key. And if we select this, you can see it's keyed right there. I'm going to come back up to my controller, my curtain left, and now I'm going to set this to 10. I'm going to come back into my curtain left, select the key, or the my scale X, and this is going to be 0.25. And I will come down and hit key. And we can test this, we can grab our object, and now we can scrub back and forth. It scales all the way. Fantastic. You can close that. So now with that closed, at any time I grab this controller, I can tell it to scale and open our curtain left and right. I can grab both of them, holding shift, and do the same thing. Awesome. So what I'm going to do now is the same thing for the door. I'm going to open my curtains. I'm going to select my door. Oh, I have to go and unreference my door. So over here, door layer, unreference it so I can select it. And I'm going to go up to my stage controller. I'm going to add an attribute. So edit, add attribute. I'm going to say control door open. Floating value, scalar, 0 for minimum, 10 for the maximum. Hit OK. Control door open. I'm going to select my object, go into set driven key, set. Remember this has to be the driver, so I'm going to load it as a driver. I will now select my door, and I will load it as a driven. And I'm going to come down to my door open. And at 0, my door will be closed. I'm going to come down to my rotation. And I need to know where I'm going to rotate this. So if I hit my scalar, or my E key to bring up the rotation, and I just grab here and I rotate, we can see that this rotates in the y-axis. So I'm going to come down to my y-axis, so rotation y, and I'm going to say key. So with the controller open at 0, it should be closed. I'm going to select my stage controller again, make sure I have my controller open. I'm going to set this to 10. I'm going to come into my door, grab its rotation and the Y, and I'm now going to rotate this to the open position that I want it to be at. So it rotates, I have it set to 150 degrees. Right there, that's fine. And I will hit key. So now I can grab this, select my door open, and I can open and close the door. And I'll hit close. So now I can control all of my pieces from one easy location. I don't have to worry about if the curtains are closed, that I can't reach the door, and I don't have to worry about trying to select something or whichever. I have everything being controlled here, and the piece that I can set up for my timeline to animate will be this one, and it'll control these attributes, which will control this. So what I'll have you do now is go ahead and save it from here, and when we come back, we will set up the animation for all this stuff. Okay, and I will see you next time.